Now, do you have a spare bedroom that you rarely use? You know, the one that you call the guest bedroom that ends up being a storeroom for all the stuff that you can't bring yourself to throw away. Well, you're not alone. The latest census has identified that we currently have around 13 million unused bedrooms right across Australia. And according to an Australian Urban Research Institute report, an incredible 59% of households aged 55 and above have two or more bedrooms spare. And even in the 22 to 44 age bracket, 30% of households have 2+ unused bedrooms. But in stark contrast to this, Australia is suffering from the toughest rental market ever in Australia, with rental vacancies halving from 1.9% last year, which was already extremely tight, down to just 0.8% recently. So let's put this in context. For every 1,000 rental properties, only 8 are vacant. So I find this polar opposite conundrum very interesting. At a time when the news is filled with depressing stories of a housing and rental crisis, where a growing multitude are ending up homeless and living in their cars. And to further illustrate this, the latest Australian homelessness monitor has found that in the past 4 years, there's been a 27% increase in the number of people seeking help at homelessness services because they can't afford or find a rental. Now, I'm sure you can guess where I'm going with this, because in our world of growing collaborative consumption, where we can all better use underutilised assets, here lies the seeds of a solution that serial entrepreneur Ludwina Dordevic from the Room Exchange is driving. So to unpack this solve for our current rental crisis, she joins us on the show today. So welcome to Realty Talk, Ludwina.
Thank you so much, Bushy, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Likewise, I think you've come up with a solution that's been staring us in the face, but people are always looking from complexity when there's something there, and I love the fact that you've taken action on that. But before we sort of get into that, as I've outlined at the start, Australia is in the midst of a rental crisis. So can you give us a bit more detail on what's really going on?
It's quite fascinating. And just to sort of lay the groundwork here, I'm a tenant because we rent vest. So we have an investment property that we self-manage. So I have tenants. I'm a tenant myself, and I'm also a house share, and I deal with an agency. So I've got experience right across all spectrums of the housing market in that way. What's happening is that we have a lot of houses that are really big. And, you know, we went through this stage of this building what I call McMansions, and people have taken them up and lived with them with their families, but maybe the family situation has moved on. So they're living in these really big homes with lots of spare bedrooms and bathrooms, etc., not being utilised. It's not always feasible to downsize, not always affordable, and it's not always palatable for a number of reasons. Lifestyle could even cost them too much to downsize. We have a number of investors who are opting to list their property on short-term holiday platforms as opposed to making them available for long-term rental. And some of the things I'm hearing is that it's can often be quite easier for them to do that because there's quote unquote less hassle, but they often remain empty for about 9 months of the year, but they'll make the same yield renting them out for 3 months on a short-term basis. Yeah. You know, the government hasn't been focusing on building affordable housing at all. I mean, we're not even talking about social housing because we're actually Australia's first verified house sharing platform. We're not about solving the homelessness problem. But what we're finding is that, the government hasn't taken responsibility for even building social welfare housing, let alone affordable housing or high density, smaller places. So then when you get kids like mine who are 30 and 28 and in the rental market, it's ridiculous what's out there in the way that they have to live and the rents that they have to pay for. There are some areas like Hobart, for example, that I read an article recently that their rents are doubling down there. And obviously a lot of these issues are happening because of the actual increase in mortgage and interest rates. Yeah. We're feeling the pinch, personally myself as well. I was looking at my mortgage yesterday and it's gone from 3% to 5.9. It's almost doubled just in the last 6 months. And, when people were getting mortgages when they were quite low and they could afford it, now their mortgages are at the rate where the banks would not have loaned them at. So there's a lot of issues right across the board. And because of that, just simply because there's not availability, people are actually resorting to living in caravan parks or sleeping in their cars or crashing on friends' couches. Now, in this country, and it's absolutely disgusting that that's happening. And we need to find instant solutions, because the solutions that are being provided are going to take 4 to 5 years to actually turn over. And then, Bushy, the problem's just going to be double in size.
Absolutely. And we've opened the floodgates to migrants coming into the country, which is only going to worsen the situation. So look, apart from building new dwellings then, Ludwina, what short-term fixes are available?
Well, I'm hearing some stories of councils putting in what they call pods, or tiny houses on land, or even, glam tents kind of thing to house people. Because, if all of the properties are being taken up by this kind of holiday short-term market, well then, they haven't actually got the numbers there for the long term. Then you're looking at places like down, I'm from Victoria, so looking at Apollo Bay or, Colac Lawn, down that area down there, they've actually started programs like things like Adopt a Worker, where, they're actually, really asking the local communities to open up their homes and support local workers, because the hospitality industries are really being smashed, and because they can't find places to house their staff. Now, to think that my husband and I recently went to Lake Eildon. This is a great example of that. On the drive back, we could not get one coffee anywhere on a Sunday. Nothing was open. And that is going to be more and more of a problem. There's conversations. Obviously, the housing issue is top of mind for government at the moment. But again, to actually build what's necessary is going to take time. So we need to start looking at what is available right now that we can utilise.
Totally agree. And let's face it, the governments have pretty much washed their hands of the housing problem since the 1970s, when they actually stopped building housing. And the private sector are very much just in time. So unless there's a compelling argument, the private sector is not going to pull the trigger. So, we've got some real challenges there, but I know that your unique platform, the Room Exchange, has a great solution for us. So can you sort of tell us about that?
Yeah, well, the Room Exchange is Australia's first verified house sharing platform. And what I mean by that is every one of our registered users, whether you're a household with a room in your house or a housemate looking to rent a room, has to have a digital ID by Australia Post. Now, we were one of their early adopters, so we've integrated their technology through what's called an API into our tech. So when you create your profile, 40% of the profile completion has to be getting your verification. So when you input your name, your date of birth into our profile, if that doesn't match the information on your ID, you won't get verified. Therefore, you can't connect with any users. And what that does, it helps prevent potential problematic people from coming onto our platform, and it creates a fair playing ground for both households and housemates. That's the first thing. And the second thing, our profiles make it really easy to be matched based on personality, values, and lifestyle, so you feel like you're coming home to a friend. And the third benefit is that you can choose the traditional rental model, or choose what we call rent offset, which means that you can offset part or all of the rent by offering to do additional help around the house. And the benefit to that is that people who are looking to, build up their financial savings, might say, well, look, I'm happy to pick up your kids after school, or, provide companionship for an elderly person in a home, or build a vegetable garden, or in my case, I want someone to help me sell that room full of secondhand stuff that I've got on Facebook Marketplace. So whatever it is that doesn't require a license, or it's non-professional, you can ask as a housemate, and you can also put that in your profile as a household that you're willing to offset part or all of the rent by requesting that help. Now, what this does is homeowners aren't renters. They don't see themselves as renters. So we've created a platform that helps alleviate the potential problems that they think that they might come across through going through this process. So they can go on our platform, use it completely free. There's no charge, and we cover the verification. But as a household, you can also request that we do our premium matching service for you. And what that means is it's based on a no match, no fee. So if you want us to actually recruit and interview and find your ideal housemate, we'll do that at a fee of the equivalent of the first 2 weeks rent, but only if we successfully find someone for you. And what that does is we're able to ask the questions that households don't know to ask. And we're also able to ask the questions that both parties are uncomfortable to ask. So, for example, what if we, a special friend wants to come over, or, how do we make sure that we get a house share agreement, in check at the start to, we give them advice on for the first month. It's great to have a weekly meal together and actually talk about how things are going, because really house sharing, every single person that has ever lived in a house with someone else, whether it's your partner or your kids, has house shared. And it's funny, I often hear when people ask, oh, what if it doesn't work out? And I say, well, what do you do with your partner when things don't work out? You have a conversation. And, really it's just a relationship. And if you're keeping that lines of communication open, then it will work out. And the stories that we hear, and we formed lifelong friendships with this. It's incredible. But what our platform's actually doing, it's providing a resource for homeowners to say, well, look, their spare bedrooms worth $10,000 to $12,000 a year in rent, or on our platform, it's worth up to 300 hours of household help a year. We base that at about $25 an hour in comparison to the rent, which we think is pretty reasonable. And that way the household can utilize their spare room in the best way for their household, and their housemates can actually utilize their money or their time in a way that's best for them. And what we're doing then is we're utilizing the spaces that already exist, the resources that are there. They don't have to be built. We've just provided the technology to do that, to give everybody the comfort and the security that they need to the best that is possible.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great solution, Ludwina, and I really want to thank you for opening our eyes to this glaringly obvious but massively underutilised solution. And thanks again for joining us on the show today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, as you've just heard, sometimes the solutions to big problems can be right under our nose without even seeing it. So if you've got a spare bedroom and you'd like to make a real difference to someone's life, including your own, or perhaps you know someone who's really struggling to find a place to live, jump on the Room Exchange now at theroomexchange.com. That's the room and then exchange starting with an X and without the E. Keep watching your Property Hub's go-to place for all things property here on Realty Talk.